This past August, the infamous horror game Five Nights at Freddy's turned 9 years old. Spanning 9 games, 4 spin-off games, way too many books, and the recent movie, FNAF has had a very wide range of storytelling, gameplay, and media to consume. Nearly 2 years ago, I made my first ever video essay on the newly released Security Breach, because I wanted to talk about the bugs that I encountered during my playthrough. During these last 2 years, I came across a streamer content creator who goes by Astral Spiff. He has, on 3 separate occasions, marathoned through all 12 FNAF games. This inspired me to try this challenge. The rules are simple. Play all 12 games as fast as you can, but you can't use any major skips, so no CD Plus for FNAF 1 or 2, and no huge mission skips in Security Breach, like triggering Roxy's destruction without going to the arcade. You also have to get an ending that requires you to play through the whole game, so no bankruptcy or insanity ending for Pizza Sim, and no old man consequences for FNAF World. Now, I'm no speedrunner, nor is it in my style to make a speedrunning video, so I decided to turn this project into 1 or maybe 2, depending on how long this is, videos of a mega review of all the FNAF games. I will work my way from FNAF 1 all the way to Ruin, and then I'll probably make a separate video on Help Wanted 2 when that comes out. I'll be combining my review with some commentary about gameplay, and maybe even some clips of what I was doing during the marathon. I'll also break down each game's story and how it fits into the grander timeline, along with a general timeline breakdown at the end. Just for the record though, I'm not entirely up to date with every different theory or interpretation that there is. I know that there are vastly different interpretations for what some things mean, and I will be going with what makes sense to me given what I know. Feel free to tell me your interpretations and theories in the comments. I also want to mention that I will be pointing out things in the books and using them as parallels for the games. I know that there are some people who think that this should be avoided, but I disagree. I do, however, think that just because you can draw parallels between events and characters within the books and games, it does not mean that these characters are meant to be exactly the same, nor does it mean that these characters are exclusive to their respective stories. Parallels can be drawn between 2 sets of characters that coexist. Anyways, without further ado, let's get going. All the way back in 2014, Scott Cawthon released Five Nights at Freddy's as a last-ditch effort in his game-making career. It blew up very quickly and gained a massive following, only helped by massive channels like Markiplier and Game Theory, who really gave it the exposure it needed. The game was, and still is, quite simple, but its lack of extravagance and complexity is what ironically makes it terrifying. You are equipped with 2 doors, lights for each door, and a limited amount of power that is rapidly depleting. With 4 animatronics to deal with, you have to ration your power and keep track of all the animatronics before they kill you. I gotta say, while nostalgic, this game isn't as scary as people made it out to be when it came out. And even without knowing strategies, you can beat nights 1 to 6 without much of an issue. A few years ago, I managed to beat the game by accidentally stalling both Freddy and Foxy, so through all 6 nights, I didn't have to deal with them once. I tried that with 420, but they move far too fast to successfully stall them for the whole night. I accidentally formed this strategy. I knew that I would be able to camera stall Foxy, but I didn't know that I would also be able to block Freddy in the process, which was a nice surprise. This has led to the game being pretty easy for me. It's become a repetitive loop of checking the lights, then flipping the cameras up to stall Freddy, switching to Foxy's cam to see where he's at, and then repeating all of that for nearly 9 minutes because the nights in this game are so damn long. I must also confess that I don't find this game all too scary. It is definitely tense and the cause of much dread, but I find that a game loses its fear factor when it tells you a jump scare is coming. This can be an issue for all 4 of the animatronics. If Bonnie or Chica get into your office, you won't be able to use the doors, and it'll make a sound effect when you try. The next time you pull up the cameras, they'll kill you. The jammed doors tell you exactly when you're too late to stop them, and therefore tells you exactly what's going to happen when you inevitably open the camera. This can also be applied to Foxy and Freddy, although they have ways around it. Foxy will slowly peek out of his curtain in Pirate's Cove. Once he's fully out, he will run through the hallway and jump scare you. The first few times you see him running through the halls, it's freaky, and you only have a few seconds to react and close the door. But as you go along, you come to realize you never actually have to look at the hallway, so you never actually have to get to the point where you only have a few seconds to react. It's made clear when Foxy leaves Pirate's Cove, so as long as you don't check the hallway, you have a lot more time to close the doors before he attacks, meaning he loses that fear factor, as you always know when he's going to come for you. If you see that he's left Pirate's Cove, you can just close the door before triggering his run cycle. This guarantees your safety, completely eliminating any worry about Foxy's attack. Last but not least, there's Freddy. He attacks in two different ways. He becomes active from night 3 onwards and slowly makes his way to your right door. He will never show up in the doorway though, he'll only be visible on the cameras. Once he makes it into your office, he has a 25% chance of attacking you every second your camera is down. This is very good in terms of fear factor, as you don't actually have a guarantee of when he'll kill you. If you're unlucky, you may not even know that he's in your office, allowing for a jump scare that will catch you completely off guard. Freddy will also attack when you run out of power. When the power goes out, the room goes dark and Freddy begins playing his song. Sometimes it's quite long, and sometimes it isn't. Most of the time, however, after the song, the screen goes completely black and it makes you wait for the jump scare. On one hand, it builds tension as you don't know exactly when it's coming. On the other hand, it tells you that the jump scare is imminent, and instead of being tense, it just gives you time to prepare. You could also get unlucky and get immediately jump scared after the song ends, which is better in terms of fear factor, although the song still tells you that the jump scare is on its way. I'd say that the biggest source of tension from the power outage is when it happens at 5 AM. When you're so close to beating a night, you have to hope and pray that Freddy will take a long time to get to you, so you can just barely survive the night. This is what happened when Markiplier beat 420 mode, and I assume that it's happened to others as well. I mean, it's happened multiple times to me during Help Wanted. Anyways, there is a mysterious fifth animatronic. Very rarely, one of the posters on cam 4B will switch from Freddy to the face of a golden Freddy. If you see this, you will come face to face with the golden bear when you put the cameras down. If you do nothing, which you most likely will the first time, he will eventually jump scare you. However, if you put the cameras back up, he'll go away. He can attack you whether or not the doors are closed, but the camera flip will always send them away. With that being said, the only thing left to touch on is the story of the game, which there isn't much of. There are a lot of subtle pieces of lore to plant seeds of a story. Rare chances of news articles appearing on cameras that talk about the missing children's incident, or the blood and mucus leaking from the robots, as well as Phone Guy bringing up the bite of 87. This, along with the animatronics having laughter that sounds like children, tells a story of children being killed, stuffed into the robot suits, and their souls went on to possess the animatronics. Each game goes on to expand the lore in various directions, but for a first game, this story tells a hidden but straightforward story with a lot of room to be expanded. That being said, I don't really have anything to add, so let's move on to FNAF 2. Released less than 4 months after FNAF 1, this sequel showcases new faces, a new establishment, and new lore. And it rocks. It takes everything good about the first one and makes it better. More animatronics, no doors, different types of gameplay, and more lore. This game has nearly 3 times as many animatronics as the first game, and I personally think that it's a lot more fun to balance all 11 of them than it is to balance the 4 from the first game. This time around, you have 2 sets of animatronics, the toys and the Wither. They're exactly as they sound. The toy animatronics are new and improved reimaginings of the original robots, coming with facial recognition that's meant to protect the families in the pizzeria from any criminals. The withered robots are just that, withered and older versions of the core 4 animatronics. On top of that, you have standout characters like Balloon Boy, who doesn't exactly fit in with the toys. Same with the Marionette, who you don't see unless you fail to keep an eye on her. I'll talk more about that when I get to the gameplay. This game gives some of my favorite character designs in the whole series. I absolutely love the designs of the withered robots, especially Freddy. The toy designs are alright. The gameplay is somewhat criticized for its lack of diversity, but I still find the game to be a lot of fun. I guess I've always preferred the ones where it just throws a bunch of stuff at you, and you have to manage it all. The gameplay mechanics can be easily categorized into 3 groups: office robots, blackout robots, and the puppet. Office robots are the animatronics that will appear around your office, whether it's an event or the main hallway. They will only ever appear there though, and will never enter your office unless you fail to deal with them. This group includes Mangle, Toy Chica, Withered Foxy, and Balloon Boy. The blackout robots are the ones that cause blackouts. For reference, a blackout is the sequence caused by an animatronic entering the office, which requires you to quickly put your mask down to disguise yourself and avoid death. This group consists of Toy Bonnie, Toy Freddy, Withered Chica, and Withered Bonnie. The last main animatronic you'll have to deal with is the Marionette. In order to fend her off, you have to keep the music box wound up. If you fail to do so, you'll hear a little jingle, and you'll get a face full of puppet. There is one other animatronic, and that's Golden Freddy. He can appear in the office and in the hallway. If he's in the office, you put the mask down and he'll fade away. If his face is in the hallway, you can either put the mask down or flip the camera back up, as long as you don't shine the light at him for too long. Anyways, to further break down the other 2 groups of animatronics, most of the time, you just have to put the mask on. When Mangle, Balloon Boy, or Toy Chica are in the vents, you have to put the mask on until they go away. Same goes for all the blackout animatronics, once they're in your office, or if Toy Bonnie is in the vents. You put the mask on and they'll go away. As the nights progress, you'll have less and less time to react to the blackouts. Sometimes, these animatronics will even force the camera down, which means you will need to react quickly and put the mask on. The last mechanic to talk about is Withered Foxy. He will appear in the hallway, and all you have to do to get rid of him is flash the flashlight repeatedly. Altogether, this makes for hectic nights, which I absolutely love to play through. I will say, most of the animatronics aren't too scary, because basically everyone but Withered Foxy lets you know when you're going to die. Marionette has the jingle when the music box fully winds down, the blackout animatronics enter your office, the office animatronics end up at a vent or in the hallway. If you see them and have to flip up your camera for any reason, you already know that you're dead when you flip it back down. Or if you react too slowly to a blackout, you already know you're dead. Foxy is the only animatronic that will attack with no direct warning. If you're too slow to shine the light at him, it's tough shit, you're dead. Anyways, the story in this game is a big expansion from what was shown in the first. There were minigames that showcase the origins of the puppet, seeing her getting killed outside of a building. There are also games that show how the puppet gave life to the animatronics, and we got our first introduction to the purple guy, the guy who killed all these children who went on to possess the robots. We also got to see another set of murders that take place in this FNAF 2 location. There were theories galore about who the purple guy was. Was it Phone Guy? It seemed like it at the time, but it was later proven false. As time went on after the game's release, people started to realize that this game actually wasn't a sequel to FNAF 1. It was in fact a prequel. Dun dun dun. There was actually plenty of evidence for this, even though the phone calls during the nights were trying to throw you off. One big piece of evidence is Phone Guy himself. He died in FNAF 1. It only makes sense that FNAF 2 comes first, because otherwise the phone calls would make no sense. Another piece of information is that in the FNAF 2 phone calls, Phone Guy says that the animatronics are allowed to freely walk around during the day.
They even let them walk around during the day.
This is something that was specifically mentioned to be banned during the FNAF 1 phone calls.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87.
Last but not least, FNAF 2 takes place in 1987. In FNAF 1, Phone Guy mentions the Bite of 87 as an event that happened previously, which means that FNAF 2 canonically takes place before the first game. I personally found FNAF 2 to be a lot of fun on replay. I've never actually had motivation to try to beat some of the harder challenges in any of the games, but I had so much fun with FNAF 2 during the marathon that I might just keep playing it and trying to beat 1020 mode. I initially had FNAF 2 labeled as Stress FNAF in my live split because I knew that it would be a lot of shit thrown at you in a short period of time, but if I ever do a future marathon, I'll probably change the name because I find that FNAF 2 is probably the one I have the most fun sitting through. It may not be my favorite game in the series, but it's definitely one that I will play from time to time, just because it's a great challenge. I will say though, there is a pretty big difficulty gap between nights 5 and 6. I somehow go from being able to one-shot every night from nights 1 to 5, to struggling to beat night 6. I'm not sure if that's just a me problem, or if the difficulty just goes up far too fast. Either way, I really like this game. This is actually the first FNAF game that I ever played, and it was my introduction to the series as a whole. Coming out around 4 months after FNAF 2, this game was meant to be the finale of the series. Which can be said about a lot of the games, but just like Mr. William I Always Come Back Afton, the series would never find itself with a solid conclusion. This game takes place 30 years after the first one, making it the first sequel to actually be a sequel. In 2023, a horror attraction called Fazbear's Frights is created, and is set to open within a week. A security guard is hired to make sure that all the memorabilia in the building is safe and all of the systems are working, because there is a fire hazard. A day into your work week, the staff of the attraction find an old but real animatronic, who just so happens to be housing the one and only Purple Guy. This game is a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to fan response, because people were very disappointed with the jump scares and the difficulty of the game. The fact is, this game is way too easy. It gives you an audio lure that you can use to get Springtrap to go to whatever camera you want, assuming he is in range. The problem with this, however, is that you can lure him into one corner of the attraction and essentially trap him there by continuously using the audio lure. Scott tried to get around this problem by having a system in place that makes it so every once in a while you have to reboot the audio, camera, or ventilation systems. This makes it so you can't just spam the audio lure for the entire night. Unfortunately, the game is still really easy. For me, at most, I will die once or twice on night 5, but other than that, it's a breeze to get through this game. I named it Easy enough on my live split because I figured that it would be the game that I'd get through the fastest. Turns out, it is easier for me to get through the first 2 games, but I still think that someone playing FNAF for the first time will have an easier time playing this than any other game, and that's because of its very simple mechanics. Look, I'll explain them right now. There are 7 animatronics in the game, but only one of them will kill you. The other 6 are phantoms that only attack in specific circumstances. Balloon Boy attacks if you stare at him on the camera for a few seconds. Chica attacks if you see her on the arcade cabinet and look at it for too long, although she will only attack once you put your camera down. Mangle will attack if you look at him on the camera for too long, but instead of a jump scare, she plays a static noise and gives you an audio error. The Marionette attacks if you stare at her for too long. I'm noticing a pattern here. Anyways, similarly to Mangle, Marionette doesn't have a jump scare. She will just appear in your face, follow your camera, and make an annoying ass noise. Freddy will attack if you have the camera down while he walks through the corridor, and Foxy will attack if you move too far to the left while he's waiting there. Each of these phantoms, excluding Mangle, will give you ventilation errors, which will make Springtrap move more aggressively. There are ways to avoid the phantoms though, mostly consisting of not looking at them. For all the camera-based ones, you just have to switch to a different camera. For Foxy, if you see him, go back into the cameras instead of moving towards the left. And if you see Freddy, just stay in the cameras or the reboot panel. Also, if you do end up with Mangle in your office, you can get rid of her by rebooting your audio. Anyways, that just leaves the errors and Springtrap. The errors are caused by different things. Audio errors are caused by using the audio lure too many times. The limit goes down each night. I'm not sure exactly what the limit is per night, but I know that as of night 5, you can only use it twice before you get an error. For both the cameras and ventilation, there is a counter, and every few seconds, 1 will be subtracted from it. Once the counter reaches -10, there will be an error. Just like the limit of audio lures gets smaller, the time between each subtraction gets shorter each night. Anyways, that leaves us with Springtrap. He is the only robot that can kill you, and he can do so in two ways. He can either make his way through the cameras to the left door of your office, or he can crawl through the vents and end up right next to you. You can seal one vent, which blocks him from going through it, and you can use the audio lure to get him onto a specific camera. Pretty easy to get the hang of, and it doesn't take very long to beat the game, although Night 5 might take a couple of tries because Springy Boy gets a bit aggressive. Anyways, let's take a quick look at the storyline and timeline placement of this game. As I mentioned, it takes place 30 years after the first game, making it the last game in the timeline as of this point. I mentioned the basis of the Night Guard aspect of the story, but after every night there are mini-games that detail the backstory of how Mr. Purple Guy got himself springtrapped. The nighttime phone calls talk about spring-lock suits that are used in the establishment. They act as both animatronic suits and mascot suits, so they can be put on people and endoskeletons. These suits get retired because they realize that the spring locks can break, causing the metal structure of the suit to snap back into place, crushing whoever is wearing it. I tell you this because after each night, we get to see the story of Purple Guy disassembling the Core 4 animatronics from the FNAF 1 location. After taking them all apart, he gets cornered by the spirits haunting the animatronics. He tries to use his spring Bonnie suit to hide, but in doing so, the spring locks fail and he gets crushed in the suit, leaving the souls to watch him become one with the animatronic he used to kill all of them in the first place. Once you beat all 5 nights and witness this, you get greeted with the bad ending? Yes, you heard that right. This is the first game of the series that introduces multiple endings. To get the good ending, there are a series of steps that you need to follow throughout the 5 nights. On night 1 or 2, it can be done on either, you have to double-click this Balloon Boy poster to take yourself into a minigame. Once you collect all of the balloons, you can jump out of the border of the level and take yourself to a secret area of the game. Picking up this last balloon will end the game. Then, on night 2, you can click these buttons on the arcade cabinet to take yourself into another minigame. After completely assembling Mangle, you can jump out of bounds again, and once you do, you'll have to do a little bit of parkour in order to get a cake. Once you get this cake, you can go back into the Balloon Boy minigame, where you do a bit more parkour in order to give this cake to a crying child. On night 3, you have to collect 4 cupcakes, which will start Chica's minigame. Once again, if you jump out of bounds, you can give another crying child cake, which will end the minigame. On night 4, you have to input a code into the wall of the office. No, I'm not joking. That will queue up a minigame following the original 2 animatronics at Fredbear's Family Diner. Instead of jumping out of bounds, you have to glitch yourself out of bounds. It's groundbreaking, I know. Anyways, you glitch yourself out and glitch yourself around multiple nearly identical rooms before you find the crying child and give him a cake. That brings us to night 5, which has 2 minigames. The first can be accessed by clicking on the Shadow Bonnie toy on your desk. This takes you to a minigame where you can teleport through all the past minigames. In order to beat this one, you teleport back to the Balloon Boy level, jump out of bounds, and then teleport to this room with a crying child, and you give him a cake. The last minigame can be started by clicking on this poster of the puppet. This takes you to a minigame called Happiest Day. You walk to the side where you find a table with 4 masked children, and 1 more kid to give cake to. Once you do, all 5 kids and your character turn into their respective masks, representing each of the animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Golden Freddy, and the one who guided them all, the Marionette. From there, once you beat night 5, you'll get the end. On this screen, you can see the same screen as the bad ending, but with all the masks turned off, the souls having been set free. Until Scott announced FNAF 4 less than 2 months after this game's release. Let's go! In an interview with Daco, Scott said that this 4th game was born out of the desire to make the fans happy, since they weren't satisfied with Springtrap's jumpscare. We can only take him at his word, but the hints towards a new game were always there, since there was a teaser in this very game. If you beat Night 5, you unlock the 6th and final night, Nightmare Mode. If you beat this, you get an ending screen where the horror attraction burns down. Brightening this newspaper clipping shows that Springtrap is hiding in the darkness, having survived the fire. Say what you will about this game, it isn't bad, but it's a definitive step down from its predecessor. I think it's better than FNAF 1 just because there's more to deal with rather than the boring nature of the original game, with less threats and longer nights. With nothing else to cover, let's take a look and see how the series followed up on this game. Coming out a lot sooner than anybody expected, FNAF 4 took the internet by storm with its confusing lore, completely different gameplay, unexplained cutscenes, and memes.
Was that the bite of 87?
This game's lore is so confusing that people, to this day, are looking for explanations for what the hell was going on during the night segments, and also, to this day, get parts of it completely wrong. More on that later. This game was announced as the final chapter, set to come out on Halloween of 2015. As time passed, new teasers would be released, one for each of the characters that would be appearing in this game. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, etc. Each image, when brightened, revealed the word Nightmare, giving the first indication of what this new set of animatronics would be called. More teasers would be released, along with some new puzzles. In the past, Scott would usually hide things in his images by making them super dark, and you could only reveal them by brightening the image. This came into play with basically every teaser released for this game, but it wasn't the only way he hid information. Scott released this teaser of a purple hat and bow tie. Brightening the image made the words "property of blank" visible. The beginning and end of the blank were also visible, starting with FR and ending with ER. People were quick to theorize that the full message was property of Fredbear's Family Diner, which sent the fanbase crazy at the thought that we would finally be getting to see the original restaurant. Not too long after, this teaser of a gray animatronic with a purple bow tie was released. Brightening this one revealed the letters Pro and Me. Once again, fans were quick to theorize that the full phrase was property of me, which would mean that this new teaser was giving us our first look at Fredbear. Fans also went further, looking into the source code of the website, finding the code GSFECFBS. It turns out that it was scrambled by a Caesar cipher, and when deciphered, the code was revealed to be Fredbear. Fans were hyped. We were finally getting ourselves a look into what started it all. Combine that with the fact that the website's source code was littered with 8s and 7s, along with every character teaser having the words "Was it me?" on them, fans were hyped. People were theorizing that this game was going to tell us the original story of Fredbear's Family Diner. We were also going to see who or what caused the bite of 87. We were going to get a whole lot of answers, until the game came out and literally nobody could piece together what the hell was going on. The minigames in between nights told a story that was basically completely separate from what was going on during the nights. Where the FNAF 3 minigames showed the origin of Springtrap, the FNAF 4 minigames told the story of a seemingly random kid who was terrified of Freddy's. I'll get more into the story later, but it's safe to say that everyone was confused. This game marks the biggest deviation in gameplay that the series had so far. Gone were the security guards in offices with lights and guaranteed ways to tell if a robot was at your door. This time, you've brought the robots home. Armed with a flashlight that will kill you if you shine it at the wrong time, it is your job to survive the nightmares and live to fight another day. The game takes a completely different approach than the others, being the first game that's almost entirely reliant on sound cues. FNAF 1 to 3 have sound cues that would be beneficial to hear, like animatronics entering vents in FNAF 2 and 3, but these are far from necessary because there are other ways to figure out where they are. This game takes away your visuals, and you're left with nothing but your ability to listen. This game goes back to having 4 main animatronics that can attack you, with a 5th or 6th one that will come in during different nights. From nights 1 to 4, you have to deal with Nightmare Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. Night 5 switches entirely from these 4 to Nightmare Fredbear. Night 6 combines them both, leaving you to deal with the core 4 until you reach 4 AM, where Fredbear becomes active, and the other 4 leave you alone. Night 7 is the same as this, but instead of Fredbear, you're introduced to Nightmare, who is basically an inverted version of Nightmare Fredbear, who works the same way, just harder. Each animatronic works pretty similarly to how they work in FNAF 1. Bonnie will come down the left hall. If he's at your door, you'll hear breathing. If there's breathing, shut the door and wait until you hear footsteps indicating that they have left the door. If there is no breathing, flash the light to scare away any animatronics that are not at the door. This could include Foxy or Bonnie if he was just in the hallway. Chica works exactly the same way, except she's on the right side. Foxy will roam the halls, free to go on both the left and right side. If he's in the hallway, and you go to the door that's on the opposite side, he will enter your closet, where he will make the night a decent amount harder. If that wasn't clear, an example of this would be, if Foxy moves to the left hallway and you check the right door, he will enter the room. Once he's in the closet, he will never leave, and you have to go up and close the door on him. The longer you hold the door shut, the more he'll back up, until he eventually turns into a cute little plush. This is indicative of how long you have until Foxy will kill you. The plush is his safest form, meaning that he cannot attack you. He will then slowly move up until his face is sticking out of the closet. That is his first phase, meaning that if you wait too long without closing the door, he will kill you. Freddy is based on a counter that goes up the longer you don't check on the bed. When the counter reaches a certain number, Freddy sends a Freddle onto the bed. Using your flashlight will send the Freddle away, restarting the counter. The longer you don't check, the more Freddles will gather on the bed, and if you leave them all unchecked for too long, Freddy himself will make an appearance on the bed and kill you. When you hit Night 5, Fredbear combines all of these mechanics. He will freely run between the left and right doors, and you need to use the sound of his footsteps to determine which door he's at. Every once in a while, he will laugh. This usually means that he has moved from the hallways to one of two places. He's either on the bed or in the closet. If he's on the bed, shine the flashlight at him until he disappears. This sends him back into his hallway cycle. If he's in the closet, close the door. There's also one more mechanic, and that's Plush Trap. In between nights, there's a minigame called Fun with Plush Trap. In this game, you are given a set amount of time to shine your flashlight on this little guy, and if you manage to shine it on him when he moves on to the X, you will be skipped ahead to 2 AM on the following night. Now, I have to admit, this game terrifies me. It has terrified me since it came out 8 years ago, and I haven't truly been able to get over it, even though I have played the game multiple times since. As a kid, I was playing the game on release day, completely oblivious to what the fuck I was supposed to be doing. As I was running from door to door, just flashing the light, I was blindsided by Nightmare Chica at 4 AM. Oh boy. That jump scare set the precedent for how much this game scares me. Scott said that he wanted to make the jump scares good, and he succeeded, because that shit scared me. I have managed to beat everything up to and including Night 6, and I can play the Fredbear portions without panicking, but Scott made a really good decision by basing this game entirely off of sound. The fact is, you won't know if an animatronic is there until you hear breathing, which would sometimes be really quiet. This forces you to be super attentive, and so you're completely focused on hearing the breathing. If you miss the breathing, the jump scares will completely catch you off guard because you thought you were safe. For a horror game, that is a genius gameplay mechanic. Now, let's talk about the story. There was a lot of discourse about it because people were confused. Between each night, on top of the Plush Trap minigames, there were also the classic Atari-style minigames, telling the story of a young, crying child who was terrified of Freddy's. This poor kid was bullied relentlessly by his brother and other people who thought his fear was ridiculous. On day 1, he's locked in his room. Day 2, he's jump-scared by his brother when going into the main room. Day 3, he collapses inside of Freddy's pizzeria because of his crippling fear of the Fredbear animatronic. Day 4, he leaves Freddy's and goes home, only to be jump-scared by his brother who's hiding under his bed. Day 5, this poor kid gets locked inside the supply closet with a bunch of empty suits and endo heads. After all of that, we finally make it to the party, where he is further bullied by his brother. The brother and his friends decide to troll the crying child by bringing him up to Fredbear and putting his head in its mouth for a big kiss. As the crying child panics, Fredbear's mouth crushes the kid's skull, leaving him to die in the hospital due to his wounds. This final minigame also spawned this beautiful meme.
Was that the bite of 87?
This was commonly believed to be the bite of 87, but theorists were quick to notice some details that may prove otherwise. In one of the minigames, you can get the TV in the crying child's house to turn on. In doing so, a show called Fredbear and Friends comes on, and it's dated 1983. This then sparked a huge debate about whether or not the game took place in 83 or 87. Scott's website had a bunch of 8s and 7s, and the TV show could have been a rerun, but if it took place in 1987, then that means the bite of 87 took place at a different restaurant than the one from FNAF 2. It's also very unlikely, considering that Phone Guy talks about his attempts to contact the original owner of the restaurants. If the FNAF 4 bite happened in 1987, then Phone Guy would have no issue getting in contact with the owners, since the bite hadn't happened yet, and this other restaurant was still open. The way it's phrased in the phone call makes it seem like Fredbear's Diner had long been closed.
Yeah, we're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
This point would later be cleared up by Scott, but before that, it was a massive debate within the fanbase. Beating Night 6 gives you a cutscene that ends with the crying child flatlining in the hospital. You can hear the heartbeat monitor go off as the kid fades away. Before that, you get some dialogue from the kid's brother, as well as what is assumed to be his father, telling him that he will put him back together. There are other details that I will get back to, but for now, let's move on to Night 7. After beating this night, you end up face to face with a locked box. You can click on the locks to no avail. Eventually, the words, "Perhaps some things are best left forgotten, for now," will pop up on screen, before you're taken back to the title screen. This was the mystery of the game. Fans were left baffled trying to figure out what the fuck this box meant and what was supposed to be inside. There were Easter eggs during the Crying Child minigames, which pointed to some weird conclusions. There was an empty girl's room in the Crying Child's house, along with a disassembled Mangle toy. Despite this, Nightmare Mangle from the FNAF 4 Halloween update was considered to be non-canon. Although I really love the design. Anyways, there's also the fact that in every minigame, the crying child is being followed by a little Fredbear plush. It's in his room, in his house, it's even hiding itself in a flower outside. Why is the kid being followed? Is he being watched? Why is the plushie talking to him? Well, there isn't much evidence of this in-game, but answers would eventually start to become clearer as future projects were released. Now, bear with me. The story for this game was written on a drug binge, and has only ever gotten more complicated as time went on. The problem with this is that, in order to explain it all in this segment, I have to skip other major lore reveals in the games, and books that followed. This makes it harder to explain and harder to understand, so I'm going to deviate from explaining it all in this segment, and I will come back to fill in the pieces as they're revealed in future stories. I tried to write it all in this segment, but I've come to realize that there are major lore reveals in future games that are essential to this story, and I can't explain it without those lore reveals. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to move on for now. Following the release of FNAF 4, Scott released a thank you image consisting of the vast majority of the animatronics from all the 4 games. If you recall the first teaser for FNAF 4, it was said to be the final chapter, and that's even repeated on the Steam page for the game, so this image seemed to be Scott thanking the fans for everything as the series came to a close. Except you all know that's not true. Soon after this image was released, people noticed that the animatronics started to change. An endo here, a Fredbear being hidden in the image? These characters that were and still are horror icons were being turned into these cute animated versions of themselves. People were confused, but their confusion would soon be answered when Scott revealed that this was all for an upcoming RPG called FNAF World. It came out in January 2016, 6 months after the release of FNAF 4, and it was met with a lot of backlash. You see, the trailers promised a 3D RPG, but when the game came out, it was in the style of the death/midnight minigames from all the other FNAF games. The game was released on Steam for $9.99, so the fans were very upset that they had paid for a game that was clearly different from what was advertised. This backlash led Scott to refund everyone and release the game for free on GameJolt. Since this is an RPG, this is the first game that doesn't follow the same point-and-click routine of the other games, and since it's a fully fledged game, it's the first game of the series that has speedrun strategies, as well as a fully fledged story, although I don't think that story matters much to the overall narrative. Some other things to mention is that this is the first game with a fully original soundtrack, and the first game where Scott hired voice actors. There is, however, a hidden narrative that connects this game to FNAF 3 and 4. It's a hidden narrative that requires you to sit on a text box until it glitches out, unlocking a side quest where you have to find clocks. These clocks take you to little minigames where you have to set up the minigames for the FNAF 3 good ending. Once you do that, you'll be able to access an ending cutscene with two glowing eyes who recite some dialogue that is very similar to the Night 6 cutscene from FNAF 4. It tells you that the pieces are in place and you just have to find them. Theorists tend to ignore this game when putting together a timeline, but I believe that this is telling us the happiest day minigames were for the crying child from FNAF 4. I will delve into this further as we go along, but for now, I'll leave it at that. FNAF World has a wide variety of characters, and depending on how you play, the game's difficulty can vary greatly. If you play normally, the bosses can be quite challenging and lead to some game overs. If you choose to glitch the game and access the Halloween content much earlier than intended, you can get characters like Nightmare Ione and Jacko Bonnie, which one-shot basically every enemy. This is where you start to get to the speedrun strategies. The first course of action is to glitch yourself to the Halloween content and get Nightmare Ione to join your team. From there, every battle you encounter is over before it begins. From there, you only need two more things: gift boxes and the neon shield. They can be acquired in two different ways. You can either A, glitch the game to acquire power-ups, or B, wait around and hope you encounter the two characters you need. When trying to speedrun the game, the first option is always more efficient. Another reason for the game's backlash was how random the character interaction is, and how useless a lot of the characters are. No matter how much you level your characters up, they're locked with the same set of attacks. Another issue is that on the character screen, the higher up the characters are, the more useless they are. As you go further down the list of characters, they become more powerful, finishing with the Halloween characters who are entirely overpowered. They have better attacks and whatnot. However, when you start a new game, you always start with the core 4 from FNAF 1 and 2. As I mentioned earlier, the way you get characters is by hoping that they attack you after you finish other battles, and each character shows up at complete random. You have a chance to be attacked by characters who are really useful, or by characters who do absolutely nothing. And there's no distinction between them. It's completely up to chance whether you get a good or bad character. This is why it's more efficient to go for the power-ups rather than the characters if you want to speedrun, because chances are you aren't going to get the two characters you need. Being an RPG, this game is the first to go all out with the endings. Of course, there's the clock ending that I already explained, but then there's the normal ending, where you kill security at Pinwheel Circus, and the game just ends. There's the hard ending, where you do the same thing, except this time, there's an extra boss fight where you fight Scott Cawthon himself. There's an ending where you travel too deep into the glitches of the universe and end up trapped with a character called Old Man Consequences. You can also just drown yourself. I'm only mentioning this because it's important later. Anyways, the last ending that I think is important to mention is the rainbow ending. In this ending, you end up in a boss fight with this bitch, and once you beat her, you can get a cutscene that teases the next game. You can talk to a guy at a desk who reveals that he made something terrible. Her name is Baby, and it's too late to stop her. The cutscene ends with the light going out, and Baby says,
"The show will begin momentarily. Everyone, please stay in your seats."
When the lights come back on, the desk man is slouched over, and his blood starts to pool on the desk. Baby killed him, paralleling something that happened in the FNAF novels. That's right, folks! We've reached that point in the series. Between the release of FNAF World and its second update, Scott started teasing two things. One was a new game, and the other was a book, which ended up being a huge source of lore reveals that directly impacted everything we knew from the games. Now, FNAF World is not the most accurate place to look for lore. The only solid piece of evidence we can take is that FNAF 4's crying child is the kid in the Happiest Day minigame. Following that reveal, FNAF World is a useless game, but until we get to the truth, I'll talk about the book. Just as a quick note though, these books also aren't the sole source of lore, because there are huge differences between the books and the games. Anyways, in The Silver Eyes, we meet Charlie, the daughter of a man named Henry. Henry is the co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, with the only other partner being William Afton. In the story, Henry ends up building a robot that's made expressly to kill himself after the death of his son. This robot is where the story gets its title. "Let's go see your dad's workshop," John said abruptly, too loudly, and Charlie nodded. "Okay." She regretted it as she said it. She did not want to open the workshop door. She closed her eyes, still leaning against the tree. She could still see it. It was all she could see when she thought of that place. The twitching, malformed metal skeleton in its dark corner, with its wrenching shudders and its blistering silver eyes. The image welled up in her head until it was all there was. Anyways, the point is, since this plot point in The Silver Eyes was so similar to Deskman, people started theorizing that Henry was the Deskman, and he created Baby, who was going to be the center of attention in this new game that Scott was teasing. Of course, this was proven false, and I'm genuinely confused as to what the fuck Scott meant when he added this to the game, because the direction that the series went in from here was so different from anything that this FNAF World cutscene had to say. Anyways, the next game was revealed to be about a sister location to Freddy's that was run by Baby. Let's take a look at it and see where the story goes from here. The period of time leading up to this game's release was wild. There were a lot of leaks and trolls coming from Scott and the fans before this game came out, and it was a crazy time to be a fan. Sister Location is a game that is completely different from all the other FNAF games, barring FNAF World, but that isn't really a mainline FNAF game. Sister Location ditches the repetitive nights from the first 4 games and introduces a new minigame for each night. It also was the first mainline game that had voice acting and a real story that was expanded upon throughout each night. It was also the first and only game in the series called Five Nights at Freddy's to only have 5 canon nights. Anyways, during the teaser process of this game, the voice actors got leaked, the names of the animatronics got leaked, there were a lot of leaks, and Scott posted a new teaser image that trolled the fans. This image was released stating that the game was cancelled due to leaks. Fans were panicked, but quickly realized that this wasn't Scott cancelling the game, but it was Scott adding a new piece to the story. The actual meaning of the image was that Circus Baby's Pizza World was closed for good on its opening day due to gas leaks. Eventually, the game was released, and the first cutscene revealed that William Afton is in fact canon to the games, and he was the one who built Baby.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
This one cutscene completely invalidated the end of FNAF World, and also set the story going in a whole new direction, as the story of Sister Location was soon to be revealed. Before we get there though, I'm going to break down the gameplay. Not only is this game entirely different from the ones that came before it, but its reception is also different. You can go on YouTube and find mixed reviews for this game. Some people love it, and some people really hate it. I fall somewhere in the middle. This game is good for the first time you play it, and it's really easy to finish, but it also has some things, and one specific minigame that really pisses me off. Let's break down the gameplay, and I'll explain the different viewpoints. Night 1, nothing happens. Just like Night 1 in FNAF 3, it acts as a tutorial. There is no threat, and there's only narration that is meant to tell you exactly how the bunker sections are going to work. There are 2 main areas. The main control office, where you can look into Funtime Auditorium and Ballora Gallery. Each time you do this, you have to give the animatronics a controlled shock to reset them back to their performance settings. Then, there's the Circus Gallery, where you do the exact same thing to Baby, except you can't see her. Anyways, check on the robots, give them a shock, wash, rinse, repeat, and bang, that's Night 1. Night 2 is where things start to happen. At first, you get a new voice guide, but he starts to glitch out. These glitches then extend to the maintenance panels that shock the robots. Due to this, the guiding voice tries to automatically reboot the entire bunker. While this happens, all electricity shuts off and you're left to crawl under a desk in the circus gallery and hold a metal slab shut while little robots try to pry it open and get to you. The gameplay for this is really easy. All you have to do is click on the edge of the metal and keep your cursor over it. Some people may assume that you have to drag it back to being closed, but the actual way to do it is just click and hold. Keep your cursor over the metal slab and you're all set. Anyways, after this, the voice comes back and tells you that he was unsuccessful in rebooting the systems, and you will have to do it manually by crawling to the breaker room on the other side of Ballora Gallery. The guide tells you to go as quickly and quietly as possible, but this is where the story starts to come in. Baby tells you that if you follow his instructions, you will die. She tells you to take your time when going through Ballora's room, and that's how you'll make it through. After this, you have to do exactly that. You can move until you hear Ballora's music getting louder. The louder it is, the closer she is. You have to stop and let the music quiet down before you can start moving again. When you get closer to the breaker room entrance, there is a scripted event where Ballora will move right in front of you. It happens at the same spot every time, and that's what I mean by scripted event. Anyways, once you make it through that part, you're greeted with another minigame. In this game, you have a danger meter and an audio lullaby. You can use the lullaby to calm down Funtime Freddy, who is in the room with you. While doing this, you have to flip open the maintenance panel and manually reboot the 8 sections of this bunker. The longer you try to power things up, the more likely you are to die. Some people think that this is the most fun part of Sister Location. Me personally, I think it's the most annoying. It's unclear to me how much you can get away with on the monitor without Freddy coming to get you, and sometimes it takes so damn long for Freddy to go back to being safe. I usually end up taking forever on this minigame because when you stop holding the reboot button, the percentage goes down. This means that the longer you're off the panel, the more progress you lose. It is detrimental to your progress when the bar drains back to 0% because you had to wait so fucking long for Freddy to go back to being safe. In my speedrun, I managed to save an hour and a half from my time by beating FNAF World efficiently. When I got to this minigame, I lost the entire hour and a half because I kept dying with like 2 systems left to reboot. It was genuinely so frustrating. The worst part is, like a certain other game that I will be getting to, security breach, this game has an unreliable save feature. Every time you die in a minigame, other than Night 4, you have to restart from the section before it. This means, for Night 2, you have to crawl through Ballora Gallery every time you fuck up in the breaker room. Anyways, after you successfully reboot all 8 systems, the night is over. You have to crawl through Ballora Gallery again, but this time Ballora can't kill you, so you can just sprint straight through with no danger. Night 3 drops the difficulty level very quickly. The first minigame is that you have to make your way through Funtime Auditorium. This time, instead of having to listen for Ballora's music, you have a flash beacon and can use it to see if Funtime Foxy is in front of you. Now, just before doing the speedrun, I actually learned about the mechanics of these crawling sections, and I can explain to you exactly how they work and exactly why it's so easy to skip them. Basically, these segments are designed with one thing in mind. Scott assumed that players would hold down the W key. This assumption is the basis of the entire minigame. You see, Ballora and Foxy are programmed to move towards you when you hold W. This means that you can skip the entire segment, minus the scripted Ballora scene, by spamming W instead of holding it. That is no joke. All you have to do is spam W, and you can go right through Funtime Auditorium without being attacked once. You can also do this in Ballora Gallery, but you will have to stop when Ballora passes in front of you. Anyways, once you completely bypass this first challenge, you are then met with Funtime Freddy. Again. This time, you have to perform some maintenance on him. So, you open his faceplate by pushing a series of white buttons that blend into his face, and then take a power chip from his chest cavity. Once you do this, the Bonnie hand puppet disappears from his arm, and you have to lure it into the open and push the button on its chest to reset it. I used to have difficulty on this one, but then I learned about a way to beat it every time guaranteed. All you have to do is move your flashlight to the bottom left of the screen. Then, you move directly from there to the bottom right of the screen. From there, you slowly drag it from the bottom right to the top left. As you do this, Bonbon will become visible, and you can click on the button with no problem at all. Anyways, after this, you crawl back through Funtime Auditorium, but you get a scripted jump scare that leads you directly into Night 4. This night is commonly the one that the fanbase dislikes, but I personally find it to be the most fun. In this minigame, you are put inside a spring lock suit. As the locks loosen, you have to wind them up, while also dealing with these little dolls that were crawling up the mask. Initially, it was way too hard, and Scott had to release a patch to make it easier. Markiplier, being the king of FNAF, was able to beat the original version. I've gotten quite used to the way the minigame works, and I can beat it within my first couple of attempts, whenever trying to do a playthrough. It's an unpopular opinion, but I think Night 4 is the most fun, and Night 2 is the most annoying. Anyways, the Springlock Challenge is the only one for Night 4, and once you beat it, you're out, and there's one night left. During Night 5, you only really have to follow instructions. At first, you crawl through Funtime Auditorium, but there's nobody there, you can just run right through. Then you meet up with Baby, who gives you a code that you have to input into this number pad. This gives you a key card, which you then use to get into the Scooper Room. Once there, it's revealed that Baby wasn't actually talking to you. It was an amalgamation of the 4 robots from the other nights. You get scooped, and Ennard takes your place, using you as a skin suit so they could escape the bunker without being caught. That takes us to the custom night of this game, which was added in a later update. Anyways, the last piece of gameplay from the base game is the alternate ending, in which you disobey Ennard's instructions, go the opposite way of the Scooper Room, and end up in an office where Ennard tries to make his way towards you. This is without a doubt the hardest challenge in the game. It's classic FNAF. You have limited power, 3 doors, and a camera. I have yet to beat this because I find it really difficult, but I'll do my best to explain it. Ennard can come into the office from the left and right hall, as well as a vent that connects directly to the office. When he moves, he usually makes a squeaking noise, but he can also sometimes move silently. You'll hear if he's on the left, right, or in the middle, and when you hear him move twice, it likely means that he's directly at the door. When he moves away, you will hear a sound cue. The power is very limited during this, and any time spent with unnecessary power usage will result in a game over. You have just barely enough power, so there isn't anything to waste. You have to spend as little time on the cameras and hope that you'll get lucky with the sound cues. Beating this results in a cutscene where Ennard follows you to your house, and you can see in the credits that this is called the fake ending. There's also a custom night DLC that's very similar to this Ennard night. Each animatronic is given a new mechanic that works with the doors, and it's your job to keep track of them and keep yourself alive. I'm not really the most knowledgeable about how the custom night works because I haven't really played it. You only unlock it when you beat the Ennard challenge, and since I haven't gotten access to it. I do know that it has lore reveals though, and I will explain those in just a moment. First, we have to go back to Night 1 to take a look at the whole story. Remember that teaser that told us about Circus Baby's Pizza World closing? Well, if you didn't already know, that gas leak was a cover-up. The real reason it shut down was revealed in a minigame you would sometimes get if you died. This minigame follows Baby as she collects different types of cupcakes and distributes them to a bunch of kids. If you use the cupcakes in a specific order, you would make it to the end of the level and find an ice cream cone. Taking this ice cream cone back to the very start of the minigame would give you a little cutscene of a girl walking up to Baby and getting scooped. Baby's stomach split open, grabbing this girl and pulling her in, resulting in Baby's eye colors changing from its original blue to match the green eyes of the little girl. It's obvious that Baby was now possessed by this child, but who is the child? Well, now we get to the big lore reveals. The very first thing that you see when you open this game for the first time is a cutscene where someone is asking the creator of these animatronics about their design. At the end of the cutscene, it's revealed that someone named Mr. Afton created this set of Funtime animatronics. You may recognize the name, as I just mentioned him when I was talking about the books. William Afton is the co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, alongside Henry. Afton is now revealed to be the creator of these new animatronics, and big reveal, Afton is also the purple guy. We can confirm this through the books, and from this game. In the books, Afton is revealed to be Purple Guy because he puts on the Spring Bonnie suit and attacks the main characters in an abandoned Freddy's location. In this game, we know that Afton is the one who built the Funtime robots, and we can see that Baby was designed to capture and or kill children. There are also blueprints in the game files that reveal that these robots have built-in voice mimicking, as well as other tricks to lure and capture children. All of this points towards Afton being the child murderer we have been learning about since the second game. Now, who is the girl who ended up possessing Baby? Well, at the start of each night, you can hear voice clips of a little girl asking her father to go see Baby. She's excited. She really wants to see this animatronic. But most importantly, she says,
"Didn't you make her just for me?"
This means that the little girl who so desperately wanted to see Baby was Afton's daughter. Afton, who obviously built these robots for murderous intent, didn't want his daughter to be anywhere near them, but she disobeyed. Another piece of evidence we get to support this comes from one of Baby's voice lines, and another one from this little girl. On night 3, if you disobey Hand Unit and go to Circus Gallery, you can get a new interaction with Baby. She tells you a story about how she was only on stage for one day, the day the pizzeria opened. She counted the kids watching at the stage, but said that something happened when there was only one kid left in the room.
Something happened when there was one. A little girl, standing by herself. I was no longer myself, and I stopped singing. My stomach opened, and there was ice cream. I couldn't move, at least, not until she stepped closer. There was screaming for a moment, but only for a moment.
This already describes the cupcake and ice cream minigame quite well, but there's more. One of the voice lines from the little girl says,
"Where did the other children go?"
This gives us more confirmation that she was the one who got scooped. She wanted to see Baby so badly, but her father wouldn't let her, so she went anyway. She ended up being the last kid there, so she got closer to Baby and got herself scooped. And this incident led to the entire pizzeria being shut down on the day it opened. Now these animatronics are left underground, in a bunker, to be sent out as rentals. This is how things worked for a while, seemingly, until our character made his way into the bunker, and their new plan arose. The 4 Funtime animatronics put together their plan, and Baby manipulates the protagonist into helping them, feeding on his desire to help them. She talks to him, guides him through Ballora Gallery, kidnaps him and puts him in a Springlock suit, because that's a good way to make him trust you. And then, when all the animatronics merge into Ennard, he continues to mimic Baby's voice in order to get the protagonist to continue to help, leading to the animatronics scooping him and escaping in his body. This is where the story was left until the custom night continued it. Beating the challenges on their hardest difficulty resulted in these pixelated cutscenes following a man walking through the streets. As you beat more of the challenges, you got more cutscenes, following the same guy as his skin deteriorates further and further until he becomes a purple sack of rotten skin. When the body got too bad, Ennard ejected himself from the body. But even after this, the man gets up, somehow not dead after being scooped. This leads to the last cutscene that you get for beating the hardest challenge in the game. In this cutscene, we are properly introduced to our protagonist for the first time.
"Father, it's me, Michael. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not."
So, we're following a guy named Michael, who was sent here with instructions from his father to
"Put her back together."
Does that sound familiar? It's exactly what the crying child was told at the end of FNAF 4. The cutscene ends with Michael telling his father that he's
"Going to come find you."
After that, Springtrap jumps onto screen from the burned remains of Fazbear Frights. This cutscene caused a debate about whether or not Michael was supposed to be Springtrap. This happened because Scott put an effect on Michael's monologue to make it more dramatic. He slowed it down, which ended up making Michael sound a bit robotic. People also thought that Mic Trap was confirmed because right as Michael says,
I'm going to come find you,
Springtrap jumps out, making it look like Springtrap was now taking action on this goal. There's also the fact that Michael rotted and turned purple, which made it look like he was supposed to be the purple guy. Narratively, though, this makes absolutely no sense. Michael needs to be scooped to allow Ennard to escape the bunker. We know, based on the monologue, that Michael's goal to find his father stems from the events of Sister Location. We can also gather that Ennard leaving his body is a recent event, because he doesn't understand why he isn't dead. We also know that by the time Fazbear's Frights opened and burned down, Springtrap would already have gotten stuck in the suit. In order for this cutscene to represent Springtrap going on a quest to find his father, that would mean that Michael would have A. Gone to the bunker, B. Gotten scooped, C. Become a rotten corpse, D. Have Ennard ejected from him, and then finally, somewhere along the line, get into the Spring Bonnie suit for no reason and become Springtrap. On top of that, in order for Michael to be Springtrap, this monologue would have to happen after FNAF 3. Why would he be going on this whole monologue referencing the events of Sister Location when it has been at the very least 30 years since he was trapped in the Springlock suit? Michael being Springtrap makes no sense, and Scott even made a Reddit post to confirm that this wasn't the case. There are two purple guys, but only one of them is actually purple. William was the purple guy in the sense that he was represented by the color purple. In minigames with a black background, purple was used to show a shadowy figure, just like in art, blue is used to shade a black suit. That's actually the reason why people think Spider-Man 2099 has a navy blue suit. William is represented by purple to say that he's a shadowy figure in a dark room. Michael is represented by purple because he is physically purple. They are two different characters, and Michael is not the purple guy, despite the fact that he is purple. Anyways, Michael's monologue also gives us more information about the other games. Michael sets himself on a path to find his father. This contextualizes the night guards in each of the other games. In both FNAF 1 and 2, beating the custom nights gets you fired. Both times you're fired for the same reasons, tampering with the animatronics and odor. What initially seemed to be a joke was now recontextualized into the continuity between games. Michael, being a rotten corpse, would obviously smell horrible, and his goal to find his father would result in him tampering with the robots to find clues, or to try to undo what William had done in the past. So, now we have confirmation about who we've been playing as the entire time. Michael Afton. After being scooped, he was going from location to location looking for his father, until he finally found him during FNAF 3. But he lived through the fire, so the story isn't over just yet. That's the entire point of this last cutscene. If you think about it, like I have been, you realize that the monologue doesn't line up with what we're seeing. As I mentioned, the monologue seems to directly follow Michael's experience from Sister Location, but that isn't a big deal, as long as you look at it from a thematic standpoint. Michael's monologue is meant to explain what the story has been this whole time, telling us what we've been seeing up until this point and what we're going to see. Michael is going to finish the job. It's also telling us that Afton is Michael's father. That's why Springtrap pops into frame when Michael says, "I'm going to come find you." The point of the actual cutscene is to tell us that William survived and that the next game is going to bring him back. Together, it's a teaser for the next game, but each part separately explains different parts of the story. Anyways, there's one more thing that I have to explain from this game. Scott made a public post talking about retcons and how he clarifies past details in new games. He specifically said that Sister Location was used to clarify something from FNAF 4, and that is the date that it happened. During Ennard Night, you can type 1983 on the keypad, and that will activate the monitors in the room. Doing this will show you surveillance of the FNAF 4 bedroom, as well as the plush trap hallway. This confirms that the byte we see on Night 5 was the byte of 83, not 87. The surveillance also reveals the identity of the crying child. In the same office, we see the real version of Psychic Friend Fredbear. This, along with the surveillance, is enough to put together that Afton is monitoring his own house. But there's more. During the Breaker Room minigame on Night 2, you can see a map of the entire bunker area. This map also includes two areas that don't actually fit into the bunker. There were two observation areas that stick out, because if you look at it, the area on the top right corner matches the house layout from FNAF 4. On the bottom left, there's an area that matches the plush trap hallway. This means that the FNAF 4 house is directly connected to this bunker, which further cements the fact that Afton owns the FNAF 4 house, which means that Crying Child is also an Afton. So now, we have basically the entire Afton family. William, who has murdered a bunch of kids and became Springtrap, Crying Child, who got chomped and died, Michael, who got scooped and lived, and as of this game, an unnamed little girl who got herself pulled into baby. But wait, if you thought I was done explaining the lore reveals from this game, you'd be wrong! There's more! These next reveals partially come from books, though. 8 months after Sister Location came out, the sequel to The Silver Eyes came out. It's called The Twisted Ones, and it gets its name in a similar way as the first. Anyways, in The Twisted Ones, it's revealed that there is a Freddy's Pizzeria underneath Henry's old house. The hallway ended in a heavy metal door, partially cracked, and Clay beckoned John to help him open it. It squealed and protested, then gave way at last, opening into a simple room of dark stone. One wall of it had been knocked down, and the room gaped open, the cool night air pouring in. John looked at Charlie. "We're out! We're okay!" he laughed. "Don't you see where we are?" she whispered. Slowly, she walked the length of the room, gesturing to the 4 enormous pits on the floor, one of which contained a headless, half-buried robot. "John, this is my dad's house. It's the room we found." This is further evidence to support that the Sister Location bunker is underneath the FNAF 4 house. Another lore revealed from this book is the sound illusion discs, which is also one of the most divisive ideas in the series. In this story, we are introduced to the twisted animatronics. These things bury themselves during the day and come out at night to take their prey. During the book, Charlie and John find out that these things aren't actually designed to look like these twisted, melted robots. They look like the Funtime robots. It was a flat disc, about the size of a $50 coin. She held it up to her ear. "Wow, that's really high-pitched. I can barely hear it. The sound is why you feel sick." Charlie wedged her fingernail into a small groove on the side of the object and flipped a thin switch. John took several deep breaths, then stood upright again slowly, testing himself. He looked at Charlie. "It stopped," he said. "Charlie," John whispered, nodding towards the beast on the ground. Charlie looked, and a shock went through her. The illusion of fur and flesh was gone. It was nothing more than a broken robot with unfinished features. Later in the book, the illusions are explained in further detail. The disc emits 5 sound waves that continuously vary in frequency. First, they match one another, then they don't. They go in and out of harmony, always on the edge of forming a predictable sequence, but then branching away. "I don't understand. So it's not a pattern?" John said. "It's not, but that's the whole point. It almost makes sense, but not quite." Charlie paused, thinking for a moment. "The tone fluctuations happen so fast that they're only detected by your subconscious. Your mind goes mad trying to make sense of it. It's immediately overwhelmed. It's like the opposite of white noise. You can't follow it, and you can't tune it out. So the animatronics aren't changing shape. We're just being distracted." These illusion discs became the new explanation for the nightmares. The discs were made by Afton, as shown by the Afton Robotics trademark on the discs themselves. It was theorized that this little disc in Funtime Freddy's chest was one of the sound discs, due to the fact that the twisted animatronics were described as having a long, straight split exposing wires and a line of metal frame running down the center of their faces. They are also said to have a thick plastic material stuck to the face in large patches. Due to this, it was initially theorized that the illusion discs were used by Afton to turn the Funtimes into the nightmare robots, and keep the crying child scared of them. This is because it was also initially assumed that Baby killing the little sister happened before the bite of 83, so Afton was using the illusion discs to make sure that his other kids were afraid and stayed away from the robots. Anyways, that was the original explanation for the nightmares, but there's another one. Although I'm not going to get into that right now. For now, we have one last thing to go over before I can move on from Sister Location. Not too long after the release of the Twisted Ones, there was another book that came out. This time, it was a do-it-yourself kind of book. It was presented as an employee logbook, although it initially belonged to dear old Mike. Along with him, there were also 2 other spirits in the book who were changing things within its pages. Anyways, we know it's Michael because it makes references to the event of Sister Location, specifically noting the employee gift baskets mentioned in Night 5. We know, due to the page where it says this book belongs to, that in this logbook, Mike writes in red pen. So, on this page talking about recent dreams, we can see a sketch of Nightmare Fredbear that's drawn in red pen. This confirms that Michael has seen the nightmare robots, whatever they are. Funnily enough, this discovery initially led to a theory that Michael was the bite victim, and when he died after the bite, he was put back together as a robot, who then got scooped and became a rotten corpse, because robot skin will obviously rot just like human skin. Yup. Anyways, that theory is wrong, and whatever explanation you believe about the nightmare animatronics, Michael was the one experiencing them during FNAF 4. With that, I'm gonna move on from Sister Location. As I'm writing this, Sister Location takes up nearly half of the script. I didn't realize that Sister Location and the books surrounding it revealed so much damn lore. I don't think it ever occurred to me just how much of the story was revealed in this game. Mike's role as the protagonist, him, Crying Child, and the little sister all being Aftons, secret rooms, skin suits, rotting corpses, an upcoming return of Springtrap, a mass of wires wandering around in the sewers. Holy shit, this game is stuffed! Anyways, this video is getting quite long, so I'm going to cut it here, but there will be more parts coming out soon as I have more games to cover and that final timeline. So stay tuned, and yeah, I just want to say a quick thanks for 1,000 subscribers. I love you guys, this is amazing, and I'm so happy that we reached this milestone. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed. Please feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.